Hello everybody and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about digital image files, and we're going to be distinguishing between graphic software programs and files. Now the key terms are raster, vector, pixels, and resolution. Our learning outcomes today are to convey the difference between vector and raster files and programs. There are two types of graphic software programs: raster software and vector software. Raster software creates images by using pixels. These pixels, short for picture elements, make up the image. Enlarging raster images can result in pixelation or jagged edges. The raster software we'll use in this class is Adobe Photoshop, and we may be using a free version online called Photopea. The next software or program we have is vector software. Vector software creates images using mathematically defined lines. These lines are created by a series of mathematical points that can be changed without distorting the image. The vector software we'll use in this class is Adobe Illustrator, and we will also most likely be using a free version as well.
Vector graphics and raster graphics are two basic types of digital images you see every day. Do you know the difference between the two? No? Okay, let's look closer. Look at these two cupcakes. The one on the left is a vector image, and the one on the right is a raster image. Let's see what happens when we zoom in. The vector cupcake looks clear and undistorted because it's made up of points, lines, curves, and basic shapes. These elements are calculated for every level of scale, so the image quality stays the same regardless of size. The raster cupcake is grainy and distorted because it's made up of a bunch of small units called pixels. Zooming in makes the pixels a lot more obvious. Vector images are generally less detailed because they're composed of basic elements. Vector image file sizes are relatively small because they contain just the mathematical instructions for creating the image, not the actual visual elements themselves. In a raster image, the more pixels there are, the greater the level of possible detail. But more pixels also results in larger file sizes. Designs such as logos and signage are typically vector images because large scaling is often necessary for printing. Images with a high level of realism and detail, such as photos and digital paintings, tend to be raster images. Finally, these are some common file types for each kind of image.
Now, raster images are made up of pixels. Pixels are very small squares, and each square is a different color. These colored squares make up the images and photographs that we see. Now, more pixels equals more colored squares, and that makes a larger image size. If you zoom in to a raster image, it will eventually become pixelated. So as we can see here, this image of this cat, as we zoom into the fur on its forehead, we may not see the pixels at first. However, once we zoom in, we can see all of the squares that make up that section of the image. Same thing here with this leaf. Once we zoom into the image here, we can see all of the individual pixels that make up the tip of that leaf. Now, images that take longer to pixelate when zooming in are considered high resolution. Images that pixelate quickly when zooming in are low resolution. For example, the image on the left is nice and sharp and clear, and we cannot see the pixels immediately. However, the image on the right, we notice, is already pixelated. The image on the left is a high resolution image, and the image on the right is a low resolution image. Resolution is the density of pixels in an inch. Resolution is measured in the unit ppi, meaning pixels per inch. The block of colored squares on the left has a resolution of 16 ppi. The block of colored squares on the right shows 64 ppi. Now, When we ask the question, which square will be a larger file size, we'll have to say this image on the right because it has more pixels per inch, being a higher resolution. When we ask the question, which will appear more accurate of a reproduction of the image, that as well will be the image on the right because it has more pixels per inch. Now again, the more pixels we have, the higher the resolution, and the lower amount of pixels per inch, the lower the resolution. And the file software we're going to be using in this class is going to be Adobe Photoshop, and we may also be using the free version called Photopea as well. Now, vector images create images using mathematically defined lines. Now, these lines are created by a series of mathematical points that can be changed without distorting the image. And the vector software we're going to be using in this class is Adobe Illustrator, or we'll also be using a free version of that as well. Now, the important thing to know about vector images now is that vector images and files are scalable, which means that you can make them bigger or smaller without losing image quality. Now, because they are math-based, vector files are smaller in file size generally, as well as when you scale a vector file, it will not become pixelated because it is not made of pixels. And we're going to talk more about this later. And again, the predominant software that is used when dealing with vector images is going to be Adobe Illustrator, and we're also going to be using a free web version as well in this class.